Hello guys, welcome back to the new video. So in this video we will provide our dependency injection using dagger hilt library. So before writing any code related to dependency injection, let's first have a brief intro on the design system of our StudySmart app. In our app we will divide our whole code base into three layers: data, domain and presentation. This approach will help us in structuring our code in a way that keeps different parts neatly separated. This separation makes it easier to maintain, test, and grow app. It's a common way to build Android apps nowadays. Now let's have a look on each layers one by one. As we can see, we already have created these three packages in our app. First one, this data layer is responsible for handling data storage and retrieval. It typically includes components for managing databases, for example, room for local storage, and making network requests using retrofit or any similar library. And after this, we have this domain package. This domain layer contains the core business logic of the application. Here we define the models, use cases, and business rules that are independent of specific data sources or UI framework. Next, we have this presentation layer. This layer focuses on the user interface and user experience. It includes view models and UI components, for example, activities, fragments, or composables. Now, first in our domain package, we will create repository interfaces. So, here let's create one more package with the name repository. Here in this repository package, we will create repository interfaces to specify what operations can be performed on the data. So first let's create subject repository. This will be of type interface, and here let me write all the functions. These all functions are related to the subject and are similar to those functions which we created in the subject DAO. So with this interface, we will interact with our UI through view model. As we can see here, we have not defined any data source to these functions. This thing we will do in our repository implementation. So here in the data package, let's create one more package with the name repository. And here let's create one class with the name subject repository implementation. And let's extend this class with the subject repository interface. And here we need to implement all the functions of that repository interface. So let's press Ctrl I, and here let's press enter. So here we will implement our subject repository. So first let's create a value through the constructor of this class of subject DAO type. So here connect this function with our subject DAO dot upsert subject. Here we will provide the subject. So why we have created subject repository interface and then its implementation. The separation of interface and implementation means that you can change where your data comes from or how it's stored without messing up the main part of your code. Consider this: currently we are retrieving data from a local database and later wanted to get the data from the internet instead. We can do that without causing problems. as long as the new way of getting data follows the same rules we set in the interface. This keeps the app flexible and ready for changes in the future. And we will implement the remaining functions in the upcoming videos when we will provide their respective functionality in our app. So as we have created the subject repository and its implementation, let's also create the other two repository, session repository and task repository and their implementation. So here in our repository package, let's create one more interface with the name task repository. So here we have these functions related to the task. In the same way, let's create one more repository for session. And these will be our functions related to the session. In the future videos, when we will implement the functionality, then we will discuss these functions individually. So for now, let's close this file and this one also. And here in our data package, in this repository package, let's create two more classes for implementation. So here we have created all our three repository interfaces implementation. We can see all our three repository implementations are using values of these DAOs through the constructor of these classes. But right now they don't know from where they need to get the object of this task DAO and how they need to create these objects. So here the need of dependency injection arises. Right now this task repository implementation is dependent on this task DAO. So here what we will do, we will tell this class that we will provide object of this task now at some place through this inject annotation. So here let's use that inject annotation and let's also use this constructor keyword. So this inject annotation with this constructor keyword is used to specify this task repository implementation that we will provide the object of this task now at some place, and dagger hilt will get the object from that place and it will provide to this class. So let's use this inject annotation with this keyword to all our three implementation. So creating the object of these DAOs, here let's create one more package with the name di, and in this di package let's create one object file with database module name. First thing, we need to annotate this object with this module annotation. So here we can see this is coming from the dagger library. So this module annotation is used to indicate that this Kotlin object or class is a dagger hilt module, and it is responsible for defining how dependencies should be provided. And after this annotation, let's annotate this object with one more install in annotation with singleton component. This install in annotation specifies the component in which this module should be installed. In this case, it's installed in the singleton component, which is the predefined hilt component for managing singleton scope dependencies. So here first object we will create of our room database. So here let's create one function with the name provide database, and the return type of this function will be whatever object we are creating. This function will create the object of our room database, so we will return the app database class. This is the same file we created in our local package here, this one. So we are creating the object of our app database. That's why we are providing the return type of this function as app database. And here we will create this room database object with the database builder we get from the room library. Here let's use database builder and let's press Ctrl P. So we need to provide these three things. So first it needs the context. So here we can provide our application context. So how we will get the application context? This dagger hilt will provide us that application context. We just need to get the application object from these parameters. So here let's use application with this application, this one, and we will provide this application as the context. And second thing, we need to provide the class. So which class we created? We created with the name app database. And last thing, we need to provide the name of our database. So we just provide the hard coded string, and we will call our build function here. So this is how our app database object will be created. And how this dagger hilt will know that this function will be used for providing the object. So what we will do, we will just use the provides annotation. So this provides annotation is used on functions to declare that they are responsible for providing objects of dependencies. And each provides annotated function must return the type of the object it's providing. So in our case, this app database. And next thing, let's annotate this with singleton also. This singleton annotation is used to specify the scope of the provided dependency. It makes sure that there will be only one instance of the provided object throughout the application. So in the same way, we will create the object of our DAOs. So first, let's create the object of subject DAO. Again, we will use this provides annotation with singleton annotation. And here let's create the function with provide subject DAO. And here this function will require the database. The return type will be subject type because we need the object of this subject DAO. So here how this object will be created, we just provide the function we created in our database. So let's call that one subject DAO. So here when we press Ctrl B, so here we can see we created these functions in our room database class. So we will just use these functions to create the object. And here we can see it is taking the object of this app database. Here we can see we already have defined how this app database object will be created. So room will take the object from here and will use to provide to this function. And in the same way, let's copy this one and use two more times. And this time let's use for this task_DAO, and the return type will be task_DAO. And here let's call this task_DAO. And in the same way for our session, we will use this provide session DAO. So this is all the code for our database module. So first let's minimize these imports and let's close this file and these files also. So from these repository, our data will be passed to the view model, and then we will use that to update our UI. So here in our presentation package, we will create one view model per screen. So here for now, let's create dashboard view model first. So let's extend this class with view model. So Android should know that this class will be used as a view model. The view model is a part of the Android architecture components and serves as a bridge between the repository and the UI layer. It is responsible for managing UI related data and state. The view model observes changes in the data from the repository and provides this data to the UI. So here again we will use those inject constructor keyword. Here let's create a value with subject repository of this type subject repository interface. So in the future videos, here we will manage our state and events. And here we can see we are using this repository interface. Let's press Ctrl B. So here we can see we have this interface. But these functions we have implemented through the implementation of this repository interface. So how this view model would know that it needs to get data from the implementation of this repository. So we will bind this repository and its implementation through the dagger hilt. So dagger hilt will provide this thing as we already have used this inject constructor. So with this annotation, it will ask to the dagger hilt. So dagger hilt will find the binding of those two things. Then it will provide to this dashboard view model. So in our DI package, let's create one more class with the name repository module. This time we will keep this as an abstract class. This abstract class will be very helpful to provide all the binding functions at one place. So again we need to annotate this class with module annotation. So dagger should know that it needs to look to this class for object. And again let's also annotate this with install in. So here let's create first function with the name. It will be of type abstract function and with the name bind subject repository. And the return type of this will be subject repository because we will bind this subject repository interface. So to which it needs to be bind, here we will provide. This needs to be bind to this implementation of subject repository implementation, this one. And again we need to annotate this function with singleton, and this time we will annotate this with bind. The bind annotation is used to specify that this method is used for binding an interface to an implementation. In the same way, we will bind our other two repositories. So this is all the code for our repository module. Now let's go back to our dashboard view model. Now it knows how to get the data from the implementation of this interface. We also need to annotate this class with hilt view model. Hilt view model is like putting a special mark on a class that helps dagger hilt understand that this class is a view model, which is a part of an Android app that manages and stores data. And how the object of this dashboard view model will be get in the UI. So here let's open our dashboard screen, and in our dashboard screen route here let's create our view model with val view model. It will be of type dashboard view model, and let's use this hilt view model, this one. So we can see this hilt will provide us this hilt view model function. So with the use of this function, we don't need to do anything else. As we have created this dashboard view model, let's create view model for other three screens also. Now let's go to our subject. Let's rename this session screen view model to just simply session view model by pressing Shift F6. And in the same way, let's also create the task view model. We have created all our view model. So first let's close all these files. Now few more things we need to do. First let's go to this main activity. So here this main activity is our Android component. So we also need to annotate this class with Android entry point. By annotating Android entry point, dagger hilt will inject the required dependencies into this component when it's created. And next let's create our application class in our StudySmart package with this StudySmart app name. So let's extend this class with this application class, and we won't provide anything in these parentheses, so let's remove this. Here we need to annotate this class with hilt Android app. When we annotate the application class with hilt Android app, we are telling hilt to generate the necessary code and configuration for dependency injection in our Android app. Let's also specify our application class in the manifest file. Here name smart study app, this. So this was all the code related to the dependency injection using dagger hilt. And from the next video we will start providing the functionality to our Android application starting from the dashboard screen. Do subscribe so you don't miss the next video. Thanks for watching.